We are live with the Monaco Brewing Company times. It is Friday afternoon. I promised we were going to go live at 2:30, but Senator Chris Larson has a very busy schedule, so we've been able to cut this a little bit earlier today. Senator Larson, thanks for joining us for a quick hit to get your thoughts on some of this stuff going on with ICE.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kirk. Thank you for bringing attention to all the bad stuff that's going on out there and speaking truth to power.
Cool, man. So ultimately, I want to get to uh, a quote that Lieutenant or Governor candidate Sarah Rodriguez said about banning ICE from sensitive places like churches. But I wanted to lay the groundwork first. Why are we talking about ICE? Because they are terrorizing our neighboring state, Minnesota. They're terrorizing the Twin Cities in particular. Um, we have to be prepared in
Yeah.
Wisconsin for this to happen to us. So, you're a state senator. How is our state government preparing to protect not only immigrants but American citizens from ICE terrorizing us in the future?
Yeah, there are a handful of folks who recognize exactly the dire situation that we are in. That we have a authoritarian in the White House, that we have a party in his pocket that is either on board with everything that he is saying, or fear that they will come at the other end of his violent mob, that they will be directed at them. And in light of that, he is continuing to push the limits, right? And most of what he has been doing that's been hitting the headlines lately is unconstitutional, is not something that should be allowed, that America should not be viewed as in the same way, frankly, ever again, if this is allowed to continue. So the blog that I posted, that you were kind enough to post on Minocqua's Substack last week. This will either be a short blip, a dark blip in American history, or this will be the rest of American history. And I think that there's a growing sense that if we are not pushing back, as more people are figuring this out, it's important to make sure that others realize this and figure out what they can do to push back. So to answer your question, what are we doing in Wisconsin? Not enough.
Yeah.
But are those conversations continuing to push. I'm proud of Sarah Rodriguez for actually putting a plan out there that basically, if you read it, it is bold in the sense that it says that ICE agents will have to follow the law while they operate within our state borders. That is it. Right, that it is
I mean,
already the case that you need to have a judicial warrant, that you have to have an individual that you are aiming to apprehend,
yeah.
and that they have to be somebody who is subject to the authority of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or they do not have probable cause. They do not have the ability to arrest and detain people. And frankly, I think we need to open up our eyes. I'm glad Sarah is. I'm glad some of the other gubernatorial candidates are, and I'm glad. Frankly, so many people in the public are open to recognizing that this is not a legitimate federal authority,
Yeah.
because they are not engaged in a partnership. The partnership is essentially that you have to have the consent of the governed, and you have to follow the Constitution. And if you're not doing that, you're not living up to your end of the deal.
Yeah.
Then the other side is going to start not to live up to their end of the deal, which
Let me
is
stop you
where
there.
we are now. Yeah.
Let me stop you there, Senator. The reason I think I texted you a couple days ago is because I got really mad when I read an article that I don't even know Sarah Rodriguez. I've suggested that none of our gubernatorial candidates are strong enough right now to deal with what's coming down the pike from Trump. But I was impressed. This is what she proposed. She said that Wisconsin should immigration enforcement actions in Wisconsin should be banned around courthouses, hospital and health clinics, licensed child care centers and daycares, schools and institutions of higher learning, domestic violence shelters, and places of worship. That made perfect sense to me.
Mhm.
I don't know why
Mhm.
why that would ever cause consternation among anybody, but the response from Governor Evers is what really irritated me, because he said that first of all, that might be, not possible or illegal for her proposal to even happen. But what really got me was he said, Rodriguez's idea will ramp up the actions of our folks in Washington, D.C. Um, might ramp up the folks in our, actions of our folks in Washington, D.C., which suggests that doing what's right and standing strong against ICE is somehow going to cause Trump and ICE to hurt us even worse. And to me, that's the classic definition of Stockholm syndrome, where Stockholm syndrome is if somebody is being held captive, they develop a kind of a relationship with their captor because they know that if they act more nice, or if they capitulate better, they'll be abused worse. And so, give me your thoughts on, because Governor Evers is our governor for better or for worse until we have an election in 2026 November, and then and then who knows what's going to happen in November. So if this is his approach compared to you know Governor Pritzker, who is standing strong, compared to Governor Waltz, who is standing strong, I mean, what
Mhm.
is your thoughts on this? I was angered. I wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah. We unfortunately have the Neville Chamberlain of the Midwest governing our state at this point, and I love Tony Evers. I appreciated his work as Department of Public Instruction superintendent for years before he became the governor. At that point, we needed to stop the harm, right? We needed to stop the harm of Scott Walker, and to use the metaphor that he was the goalie, but and he was a decent goalie for us for a number of years. But all goalies don't make good midfielders. They don't make good forwards, to keep the metaphor going. And we're seeing that, which is why I was part of the course of saying, look, either the governor is going to step up to this moment on education, and we listed a whole number of different things, or he should be stepping aside. He stepped aside thereafter. And I think we have the competition, and this is a chance to talk to all the gubernatorial candidates and all the people who are in public office and say it's time to meet this moment. We can't have a Neville Chamberlain. We need a Winston Churchill, somebody who is going to recognize that you cannot whistle past the graveyard, that you cannot just hope the bully leaves you alone the next day you're at school. You have to confront the bully, and you don't have to do it alone. And frankly, that's the glory of this. We have something called the United States of America. And you can lean on the other states who've already gone through this and learn what they have done to be able to expel the ICE agents from their borders and start to do those things in advance. I'm worried that we're not doing that. For my part, I'm pushing my elected officials to do the same. The mayor and the governor and other elected officials are doing likewise. The public should be doing the same too. They will be on our side eventually, because this is not going away, as we recognize. So the sooner that they join in recognizing the moment, the sooner we can push back and frankly let this be a dark blip, and instead of it letting it be the rest of our history.
Okay, so the follow-up question is, do you know, you're closer to the workings of government than I am. Do you know if Evers is part of a coalition of blue governors that are talking about this every day and sharing tactics? Because Pritzker's already gone through it. Waltz is going through it right now. It's not going well for Minneapolis, but they're going
Yeah,
through it. Is Evers even talking to them? Do you know?
I hope so. I hope so. But
Shouldn't you
we,
know, you're a state senator, you're a Democrat,
yeah,
you're not far away from the the top of the power structure, among Democrats in Wisconsin. Shouldn't Evers be telling you guys? I mean, there's only like 17 of you or something like that, Democratic senators in
we have,
Wisconsin. Shouldn't you be meeting with him and him telling you what he's thinking?
that request is in.
Okay. I didn't talk to you beforehand about
No,
this.
I know.
I was,
I know.
but I'm guessing I knew the answer, and I do know the answer. So,
Yeah, no, the
appreciate.
request is in. But I will say that from the moment that it was over a year ago that I asked the governor how much money we were going to set aside in case of federal extortion, right? Of if there's going to be money that the federal government says we're not going to give this to you unless. And at the time, we had a $4 billion surplus, and I asked that question directly of the governor, and he didn't understand it. And I had to rephrase it twice because I think he was just talking about the surplus and what they're going to invest in, but it was just a given that the federal formula is what the federal formula is, and the dollars are going to flow. We unfortunately don't have many conversations directly with the governor. I think
Yeah,
there is an attempt, and this is where I think people speaking out is really really needed.
yeah.
And pushing all of the candidates to speak out on this is really important, because otherwise we're not taking the stances that we need to be able to meet this. Because there's frankly this idea that well, there's a protocol, there's laws, this is how things are supposed to
It's
work.
it's it's so typical, yet somebody
Right,
who has followed the rules his entire life. Evers is a rule follower, you can tell, and he's followed the rules all his life. He just can't fathom that somebody in government might break the rules. And obviously, Trump has broken every rule that exists. But
right,
there's so many of our politicians that just can't get wrap their minds around that the rule of law is no longer what we're focused on here. We're focused
right,
on how to get through somebody who's breaking all the laws. Uh,
right,
so, um,
right.
yeah. So the
Yeah, no,
follow up is, um, okay, you said, okay, I'm going to add a little bit here that I wasn't going to plan to ask you because I'm going to talk to Chris Armitage, who's a Substack guy that's always 2 steps ahead of me in
yeah,
terms of what states should be doing to resist.
yeah,
And he mentioned, first of all, exactly what you just brought up. Like we need to be figuring out as a state how to potentially get extra dollars into our state to be able to make up for what we're not going to get because you know Trump is going to punish us. We have a blue governor. He's already punished us. So, do we need to raise taxes on the rich? Obviously we can't do that until we have a Democratic majority in the Senate. But B, what is your ideas about holding potential taxes to go to the federal government? The contract is broken. They're not giving us federal services that we're paying for as taxpayers. It might
yeah,
be illegal for us to not to pay taxes, but what's legal? What's legal mean anymore?
yeah,
Let's like what I think is let's just throw sand in the gears because they're throwing sand in the gears of our constitution. If we just stop paying taxes, then take us to court. Like we have to take you to court for everything you do that breaks the law. What are your thoughts?
yeah. I mean, honestly, the if Wisconsin did it alone, it would it might spark other states to do it, but they wouldn't be able to last that
Yeah.
way. But I think recognizing like a interstate compact would make a huge difference. I think Chris Armitage's post about this a few weeks ago has been circulated. I've had others send it to me, including you,
Yeah.
and different variations of it of saying, well, what can we do within the confines of the law, within the government that we've got to address this? And I do think it's important to craft it the way that he outlined, which is to have a trigger. Because there's a lot of folks who understand what's going on, right? I put you in that boat.
Yeah.
A lot of the folks who are tuning in, the folks who are following on Substack, they understand this. And it's those different stages, right? Which is like there's the people are living blissfully ignorant of what's going on,
Yeah.
right? Of running their errands, of doing their own thing. And at some point they're like, wait a minute, the order is not clicking. This is not how things are supposed to be happening.
Yeah.
And then it's the question of what can we do? What can we do? And I think we're at that stage now, which is what powers do we have? And so we're having to read old pieces of history and
Yeah.
frankly exercise unused muscles in our civic body, and going back to people as knowledgeable as I saw the Barbie quote from Toy Story, which is that that we should derive power from the governed, and not from force, and that is how government should work. Which is a summary of John Locke back in the day, right? That's how it's supposed to be working. We do not, if you don't have the consent of the governed in this, then you don't have a legitimate government. And I think,
Yeah.
frankly, the legislation has to be outlined to show that they are not abiding by their part, as a federal caretaker, right? That they are not accepting state rights, that they are trampling our rights,
Yeah.
given not what's just happening in our state, but what's happening in Minnesota and others, and frankly, holding dollars hostage unconstitutionally, money that was allocated. To prevent money from going to child cares, to prevent
Mm.
it from going to feed the poor, to prevent it from going to K-12 public education. The list goes on, and then being able to outline that and say, wait a second, we're until this is solved, we can't move on. And I
Yep.
think having legislation that's crafted that way is crucial. And frankly, pointing those things out and holding individual members of his administration accountable to that is how this is overcome. Because if it's him that we're expecting to change, that's not going to happen. But if we have individuals at the local level to be able to say, look, if your side is not abiding by this, then they're going to be held accountable. I think that's how we end up getting out of this.
Okay, so obviously this next question is not a state senator kind of question, but you know, you get the power structures, political power structures better than most. So the continuing resolution to fund America, fund our federal government, ends at the end of January.
Mhm.
We just had this huge fight, a month ago that, right before the holidays, where people weren't getting SNAP benefits, and so a few Democrats, few U.S. Democratic senators, I say, capitulated. They might say, funded the government to feed the poor, which those both things are true. Um, uh, they they allowed government to be funded, and and the SNAP benefits were given back. We have the opportunity to defund the government again, uh, in light of what's going on with ICE terrorizing American citizens. It's clear now. They've jumped the shark, just from immigrants to everybody that's in their way. Do you think that we should hold strong and not fund the federal government until there are some restraints put on ICE?
I think it's essential. I mean, I think it's absolutely essential, and frankly, having guarantees in place to make sure that we are not going to continue to go down this path. I think there, at the very least, there needs to be levels of accountability for those agents who are not abiding by the standards of the Constitution. Part of other things that we should just expect, and it should not be ever accepted as normal, is that federal agents are masked and trying to hide their identities and refusing to identify what their authority is when they are unlawfully detaining or unlawfully questioning people, citizens included. But it goes for anybody. That's how our Constitution is constructed.
Yeah.
And if they're not doing that, then frankly, if they're not operating within the confines of what we have established in our Constitution as the joint understanding for how we operate as humans in our society, they are losing they've lost their authority. And I think the only way that that gets enforced is by Congress. They are pretending they don't exist these days, the Republicans.
Yeah.
We haven't had a in-person town hall in our state. I believe this is the case. If somebody's gonna check me on it, that'd be fantastic. But we haven't had one in the state by a single congressman since August, and that was from Brian,
Republican congressman,
a
right?
Republican congressman, and that was only after many of us held these these empty chair town halls to try to call attention to it. We need to change that because there's this expectation. Well, they're not going to listen to you. There is the smallest of margins in the Congress now. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene decided to exit instead of having to put up with the violent threats because she dared to speak up to their dear leader
Yeah.
on what he was doing around pedophilia. So this is the chance. And we are so close. We have to brush off the learned helplessness of thinking like, well, nothing's going to happen because nothing has happened, and finally say, no, we have to keep pushing because we're closer than ever.
Hmm.
That frankly, this illegitimate secret police needs to be reined in. Otherwise, we lose what is important to America, and that, above all else, needs to happen. And frankly, holding those accountable who have already abused citizens and bringing them into accountability. Those things need to happen, or this continues to get worse.
Okay, I know you've got a hard stop in about 4 minutes, so I want one more question for you. Um, it's clear to me that uh, Trump will invoke the Insurrection Act. He is throwing ICE agents in Minneapolis specifically so that some of those agents will get hurt or killed. He's putting agents in harm's way, and so that he has a reason to then declare martial law or invoke the Insurrection Act and 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 put a hold on elections in 2026. I think from all the folks I've talked to, it seems that's a clear path. It's kind of obvious. Waltz is saying that when he's talking, he's like, he wants us to use violence. That's why
Yes.
they're doing this. So he
Yeah.
wants us to, he's telling the people that. He's like asking, please don't use violence.
Yes.
So if that's the plan, what do you think? How do you envision our elections happening in 2026? How can we protect them?
Yeah. No, I mean, if it's we cannot have the plan that hope that that doesn't happen. I think there's the expectation that he will. One of his former deputies who has wisened up and did not join this administration but worked with Stephen Miller has said that Trump was moments away from declaring Insurrection Act back in his first term, right before a State of the Union. We have Trump's State of the Union coming up, and given his tendency to try and favor strong optics and try to make it look like he's a strong leader, and he's going the path of least resistance on that by using the military, threatening those members of the military that refuse to comply with his illegal orders, threatening members of Congress who speak out and say that they should not follow illegal orders. That'll probably be when that ends up happening. This declaration of martial law and going further than we've ever seen happen before. But we need to make sure that people recognize that this is it. I think, in an individual basis, just knowing is helpful, right?
Yeah.
As the old GI Joe cartoon said, "Knowing is half the battle."
Yeah.
The next part of the battle, the next part of the next thing is making sure that your neighbors understand it,
Yeah.
because there's a tendency by folks to believe the world is working as it is intended until it doesn't. And I think just as people have become more and more isolated in their self-selection of the news and their entertainment and frankly who they talk to, it's more important than ever to bridge that divide, right? It's I don't know if we need to have a nationwide, call it Project Talk to Your Fox News viewing parents,
Yeah.
but it needs to happen,
Yeah. Yeah.
of showing like what is actually going on, and almost the same way we have to talk to them about or talk to our elderly neighbors about like scams that are out there and AI, and what AI really is to say that this is what's going on. That's going to be essential, and frankly we cannot give them what they want. I agree entirely with what Tim Waltz said in his State of the State, of saying that we cannot give them what they want. It is a miracle, frankly, that folks have not been resisting violently, and I think it's a real testament to the people who understand what they're trying to do, and it frankly boosts their support, and it boosts America standing with them. So I grabbed a book off of my shelf. It's so funny you asked this question, because I'm like, I need to catch up on my reading,
Yeah.
of like where we need to be at this moment. And frankly, we have to stand up to their violence, with nonviolence, and continue to grow the movement. There are more of us
Yeah.
than there are of them. And frankly, as much as they have their party restricted to have one person authority, the other party, for all of its flaws, needs to open up. And if you
Yeah.
don't agree with everything, get involved and push it the direction that it should go. But that needs to be as broad as possible. There's more of us than there are of them.
All right. I think the takeaway from this is that uh, in order for us to have elections in 2026, we have to do everything we can to call our Democratic U.S. senators and U.S. Congress people and get them to try to do the best they can to defund ICE, which is to stop this continuing resolution to go through. That's the first thing. If we don't have our elections, I've talked about boycotts and strikes, and I certainly hope we don't have to do that. I hope we can have elections, and in order to do that, you got to put the restraints on ICE. So thanks so much for joining us, Senator Chris Larson. Thanks for all that you do. Thanks for being a strong leader in our state Senate. Appreciate your help.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you, all of you. Have a great one. Stay safe.
All right. See you.